Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin our second discussion of the day, titled Designing the Future of Human-AI Interfaces. Moderating the conversation is Brendan Bordelon, tech lobbying and influence reporter with Politico. Joining us are Elizabeth Hyman, founding president and CEO of XR Association, and Andres Castrillon, senior director for government affairs at Qualcomm.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Liz and Andres for sitting down with me today. It's an exciting topic. It's sort of the amalgamation of two technologies that I think whose time has come or is about to come. I think we'll get into that, XR and artificial intelligence. So let's jump into it. I'm going to assume that most people in the audience have a fair bit of experience with text-based generative AI. You put a question into a app like ChatGPT, gives you an answer, you're off to the races. That is not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about interfacing with AI in a context that I think folks have a lot less experience in, and that's sort of the augmented reality, virtual reality, kind of falls under the umbrella of the extended realities world. So XR, that's your association. And honestly, I cover this stuff to a certain extent for a living, but I was thinking about this yesterday, and I'm not quite sure, in what context you would put on virtual reality glasses and start interfacing with a generative AI type piece of technology. 'Cause I think we're very used to sort of the text-based LLMs, and so I think just to kick it to both of you, but I'll start with you, Liz. What kind of use cases are you seeing now when it comes to the marriage of XR and AI, and maybe more importantly, what kind of use cases do you see coming down the pike in the next 2 to 5 years, both in like a personal capacity and also in an industrial setting?
Cool. All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank SCSP. It's great to be here. We were just commenting. We love this venue. I am looking to see who's reclining like I do at the movie theater, but that's awesome.
Your chairs look comfier.
Yeah,
than
you
ours,
look you look very comfortable. First of all, I want to take a moment just to step back, because we've had a lot of conversations about what is XR. So when I first started in 2019, it really was VR, AR, MR. And now we're broadening the aperture, frankly. We're really thinking about any technology that blends physical and digital technologies and experiences, right? So digital twins, for example, could be thought of as immersive technology, spatial computing, wearable AI. And what we're seeing now is this amazing transformation where XR is sort of foundational, and then it creates this bridge for a human experience with AI, with quantum computing. Add in geolocation technologies, and now you have this incredible mixture where you can relate to this technology and use it as sort of superpowers for amazing use cases. Like we just wrote a little bit about what's going on factory floors and how you can wear augmented reality glasses that are aided with an AI bot. And you're looking at, I need to install this widget, and it has to be very specific. This AI aid can tell the user, okay, you're off by a millicenter, like just the tiniest little bit, move it over. It'll give a visual guide potentially to how that goes in. You could have somebody who's back at the main headquarters, you're on the road, and you have sort of help from a friend. What was that television series? Call for a Friend.
Wants to be a millionaire, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. So you can get help, but not just like sort of in an ethereal way, but somebody can actually see what you see. So this is taking place on factory floors for advanced manufacturing. In healthcare, I was just talking about a doctor that I met from Florida who's using Apple Vision Pro that's AI enabled to essentially lower his or her own cognitive load in a surgical theater. Because now everybody, the anesthesiologist, the nurse, everybody who's involved in this project is getting information real time. They can see what the doctor's doing. The AI can assist them with, get ready, it's time for you to swab. And it takes some of the load off of the doctor. So those are just two that come to mind right away. But the point being, we're trying to elevate human experience and human accomplishment by combining XR, AI, and other emerging technologies.
Can I add on to that?
Please.
just by show of hands, how many of you are using an AI chatbot on a day-to-day basis? And how many of you think that those experiences are personalized to you? Okay, not as many hands go up. So this is a critical point. With this technology, we can bring context to the AI experience and make it more personalized to you. So when I go to a chatbot and I ask it a question, it puts out an output. And when Liz goes to that chatbot and asks it the very same question, right now there's a very high likelihood that it's going to spit out the same output. It has no context. Doesn't know anything about me or Liz or what our preferences are and how to customize the answers to us. With these wearables, you're wearing something that can see what you see and hear what you hear and add that context as an additional layer to an AI algorithm that's running on the device or a personalized AI agent. And so what that means is if I'm walking in Crystal City in the morning and I ask my smart glasses, where can I go get breakfast, or where can I go get something to eat? It knows what time it is. It knows that it's sunny out, and it gives me personalized instructions based on that context. If Liz is walking around on the same street at night, maybe in a different season, the smart glasses see that, they have the context, they give her very different instructions based on that context. So we think we're at a groundbreaking moment, at an inflection point where this technology actually becomes the most natural platform for AI enablement to enable more personalized user experiences.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and it sounds like, a lot of this stuff is sort of in the prototype stage, but some of it is already out there, right? Mm-hmm. I think Meta recently came out with some wearable glasses. You talked about this as sort of a more natural way to interface with AI. Yeah. In one point, in one sense, I totally understand what you're saying. And in the other sense, I'm not sure that all consumers agree with you. I do think that there's some skepticism when it comes to wearables. You see it in sort of the lack of adoption, I think specifically Meta. You can look at Meta. They've sunk like tens of billions of dollars at this point into their reality labs. They literally rebranded their company. They've lost a lot of money in that period of time. I know that Mark Zuckerberg continues to think that this is a bet that will pay off in the long term. But there are sort of some warning signs at the moment that folks are not. They haven't necessarily adopted this technology in the same way that I think folks were hoping maybe half a decade ago. You're even seeing it with AI actually as well. The U.S. Census Bureau came out recently with some data points indicating that AI adoption is starting to decline a little bit for industry. So whether it's XR, AI, an amalgamation of the two, it does seem like there are some issues with adoption. I don't know. That's probably normal to a certain extent in any emerging technology. But how are you guys looking at that? Yep. And what's the risk for the XR Association, your members, and I think specifically for folks like Qualcomm that build the technical stuff, if there isn't a big uptake in the next 5-10 years on this technology?
So all really good points. I think to this point, a lot of the reason for that slow adoption is we just haven't figured out this is a new form factor for AI, right? And it's a very limited form factor, right? So if we think about your smartphone, those have been around for a long time, and the way that you interact with your smartphone has evolved dramatically since smartphones first came out, right? When they came out, you actually used to use them to call people. Now that's like the last thing that you do with your smartphone, right? You barely use it to call people anymore. And when the smartphone came out, do you all remember the battery life for a smartphone when it came out, right? Like it's gotten better incrementally over time. Now think about trying to enable a lot of that functionality on Meta smart glasses, for example, right? So you've got limited space for compute power, and you've got limited space for batteries. And then we're also still figuring out the use cases. So I think the short answer to your question is we're at the very early stages. We're still figuring out how to pack as much compute power as possible into those glasses because we don't want them to be super bulky. We want them to be comfortable. We want them to be natural. We want it to be the same. We want you to feel the same way you do when you put on sunglasses because it's sunny out, right? It's just a natural thing to do. It doesn't encumber your day-to-day activity. We're still figuring that out. The use cases, we're still figuring it out. And we're getting super creative about how we do that. So we are doing some groundbreaking work at embedding perception models on smart glasses, for example. So when I talk about that context that we need, right, you need things like object detection, you need hand gesture detection, you need eye detection, right? And you need to pack all that, again, on this tiny form factor. And then, because of that limited compute power, no matter how innovative we are on the semiconductor side, there's always going to be a limitation to how much compute we can pack on smart glasses. And so we've gotten creative around solving that problem statement. And the way that we do that is via what we call a constellation of devices. So a lot of you right now are wearing both a smartwatch and you have your smartphone in your pocket. So imagine that certain things from an AI functionality standpoint can run on the headwear itself. Other functionality we offload to the phone that's connected to your smart device on your head. And then other functionality we offload to a watch, and another functionality we offload to the cloud. So what we're doing is getting creative about how to distribute the compute load that's required for more and more innovative use cases. And as we get better at that, the case to purchase these becomes more and more compelling. And then with the use cases, and I'll turn it back over to you, Liz, but you said something incredibly important, which is that this technology should give you superpowers. And I think what's going to happen is eventually the use cases for this technology are going to be so compelling that you're going to feel like the people who are wearing smart glasses have a critical advantage over you, and that you're going to need to wear them as well. Otherwise, you're going to be lacking in these superpowers that other folks are gaining.
Yeah, and Zuckerberg has said that, I think, repeatedly in public. Liz, I want to kick this question to you really quickly, but because then I want to move on to something else. But I also want to ask you sort of what you see as the timeline for this, because eventually everybody could be wearing.
I'm interested.
Smart glasses.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah. We're talking 5 years, 10 years, 30 years.
So let me first start by saying the smart glass category actually has shown great promise in the marketplace. People are buying those Ray-Ban, Meta Ray-Bans. But the proof is in the pudding, which is Google's about to come out with the Google Android XR. They have a prototype set of glasses. HTC just released in Taiwan its Eagle Eye set of smart glasses. So you're starting, even actually Apple has said that they are now going to focus on glasses, which is a bit of a switch for them because I think they're watching what's happening in the market.
And Warby Parker wants
Yes. Yeah. Warby Parker's going to partner with Google and Samsung. So, I mean, there's really some momentum behind this category. But I wanted to build off of something that Andres said, which is the use cases. And sometimes it's all about figuring out the right device for the right use case. So one of the really cool things that we've seen is the use of virtual reality for training, workforce training and upskilling, where you can put somebody in a repeatable experience and really learn, like, how do you change that camshaft on the Audi car or whatever it is. It can walk you through those steps, and again, overlay with AI, it can give you instantaneous feedback. So that might be a use case for virtual reality, and I totally agree on where we're headed. I think we're going to get to a point where the smart glasses replace your smartphone. When we figure out all those interesting pieces that you talked about in terms of connectivity and compute power and how you make sure that the glass frame stays cool, all of these things, this is what's being worked on, and I think I can't hazard a guess. We've been talking about this. We keep saying we're 3 years away from being 3 years away from being 3 years away.
Like fusion.
Yeah, but it is making rapid progress, and I would even go back further on the example about the smartphone. I mean, do you remember that big, huge block of a phone that was around in like the 90s? Who was going to use that, right? So, we're making good progress.
Yeah, understood. And obviously, put any hard deadlines down at your peril. I think we've all learned that the longer we
I think the SEC might have something to say about it.
Yeah, that's true too. Okay, so we are not quite in Washington, but it's right across the river. I'm a lobbying reporter. You two are both lobbyists. I think we have to talk about DC and its role in sort of the XR ecosystem. It's a very simple question, actually. What do you guys, you're talking about adoption, you're talking about innovating new technologies. What do you guys need from DC, Congress, the White House?
Well, so at the XR Association, we've been doing a lot of work just educating members of Congress and government officials about what the technology is. we don't want to get down the road in about 4 or 5 years and have one of those hearings where people are like, well, is this sunglasses or what is this? We want to be able to explain it as we go along. So that's front and center. But we have been working with members of Congress to get legislation introduced that we think helps uplift the industry and the growth of the industry. So one is the U.S. Leadership in Immersive Technology Act, and it was introduced in both the House and Senate, bipartisan. And really what this is about, we know that other countries and blocs are very deliberate and forceful about helping industry and organizing government to be a partner and not a block to innovation. So, clearly people talk about China. They have had a virtual reality and immersive technology strategy since 2015, working with all areas of their country. But even the European Union is working deliberately to bring together XR along with AI, robotics, and they have a very specific plan at their fingertips. So what we're hoping to see is that the U.S. government organizes itself so that there's an advisory body to the president that brings together all of our executive agencies, academia, and industry so that we can collectively focus on these things. The other piece of legislation that I wanted to point out that was just reintroduced last week, it's the Immersive Technology for the American Workforce Act. I mentioned that training and upskilling have been one of the leading edges of application of XR, and it really can make a huge difference, particularly for underserved and rural populations, to get good workforce training. And so we're hopeful that this bill that was introduced in the Senate, Lisa Blunt-Rochester has been a long champion for it. We'd love to see that move.
Okay, yeah, and I want to turn to Andres here because, to your point, the EU has a strategy on this. China has a strategy on this. The U.S. does not at the moment. I think I was doing some research ahead of this panel, and I think you guys were hopeful that XR was going to be mentioned in some capacity in the White House AI Action Plan, and it was not. I have been on the Hill for a long time. I've covered everything from driverless cars to now AI, quantum. XR is sort of a also-ran issue up there. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here, but it's not something you hear a ton about. You are hearing more about it, to be fair. It is starting to tick up. But I'm just curious why you think it is that the U.S. policymakers, Washington, has not zeroed in on this like some other jurisdictions, and what do you think that's going to take, to focus policymakers and the executive branch on this?
So Liz and I talk about this all the time. So I think part of the reason is that U.S. policymakers have been really focused on the development of AI and sort of what that means, right? So that's a data center discussion, that's the availability of chips discussion, that's a discussion around who's developing large language models, right? And so for the last 2 years, policymakers have been very focused on AI, but it's been very focused on the training of AI models and less focused on the actual application of AI and how AI gets used in the day-to-day by consumers, or what we call inference, right? When you actually go to a chatbot and put in a prompt and get an output, that's inference. So we're starting to see that change. Okay. I think naturally, as policymakers start to focus more on inference, you ask yourself the question: how do you and I interact with AI on a day-to-day basis? And the answer to that is on our devices, right? So when you're interacting with ChatGPT, it's either on your smartphone, your tablet, or your PC. So naturally, there's going to be a focus, I think, over time, a natural evolution where we start having a discussion around how is AI getting out into the wild. How does this technology fit in? This is another ecosystem of devices for the deployment of AI. So you're right, the AI Action Plan doesn't specifically refer to immersive technologies, but it has common themes, and one of them is workforce, which Liz just touched on. We think that this technology is going to be groundbreaking for the workforce, and specifically to helping the workforce keep up in an evolving workplace with more and more technology. We can use this technology to upskill workers. And then just in terms of like the pro-innovation, pro-deployment posture that this administration has towards AI, you can't achieve those goals unless you're promoting an ecosystem of devices that allow people to interact with and deploy AI. And we think this is central to that conversation. So, I think Liz would agree with this, but we're not concerned that we're not trying to have an XR specific discussion all day, every day. I think that we want policymakers to understand that this is part and parcel to the AI discussion that we're having, and that this is a critical part of that discussion. And that there are times when we should have an XR specific discussion, but we see ourselves largely as a part of this broader AI and innovation leadership discussion. And so for policymakers, those are a few reasons they should care. The other one Liz just touched on, right? Other countries that we compete with for global technology leadership are having this discussion, are realizing that this is a critical piece to AI technology leadership, and are putting together plans to make sure that their domestic industries have a plan not just for the development of this technology, but for the deployment of this technology for innovative use cases within their citizenship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're running out of time, so really quickly, I know we said it was going to go fast. It went fast. I do want to ask one more DC-related question, though, and it's kind of a double-edged sword of the eye of Sauron looking at you. Because on the one hand, you want DC to pay attention. On the other hand, you were talking about getting sucked into the broader tech conversations. Sometimes those don't go so well for the companies. Yeah. And on wearables and XR, immersive reality specifically, you're starting to see signs of some maybe negative attention. There was a hearing, I think the last week or two, where Meta was being accused of burying research related to kids in the metaverse and their exposure to potentially toxic or harmful content. I know that folks are worried about privacy when it comes to walking around with connected glasses, that kind of thing. How do you thread that needle, right? How do you make sure that DC is paying attention to you for the reasons you want them to pay attention to, and you don't get sucked into these debates about kids' safety or privacy? And I know there's legislation to that effect. So how do you?
I'm not sure it's a matter of getting sucked in or not sucked in.
Okay.
The duty of certainly an industry trade association working with our companies is to make sure that we're explaining to the public what we are doing about these things. So there are an incredible suite of tools that already exist. For example, in virtual reality, you can set up a bubble, you can block, you can turn off certain functionalities, you can do all kinds of things to tailor your experience in virtual reality. With smart glasses, there will be tools like the light in the corner of the glasses to indicate if a camera is on, so that the bystander is aware of these things. And that's not sufficient. So we do a lot of research in best practices. We're about to put out our 6th chapter of best practices around creating positive experiences for young people. We've done similar efforts around accessibility, like how do you build good experiences so that people of all abilities, but certainly people with disabilities, can use this technology. By the way, I'm speaking quickly, but the wristband, the neural wristband, and some of that application is going to open up incredible opportunities for people with mobility issues, for example. Mm-hmm. So, it's our job to make sure that we're talking about the responsible development of this technology and sharing with all of you the work that takes place in all of these companies and in our organization to highlight that.
Sure. And I'm going to push past the red light for a second to give Andres the final word here. If you want to talk at all about sort of like how to navigate, the pressures that DC can put on your industry, right? I think as does mature and as adoption picks up.
So this is part of being a technology innovator, right? Like we have to develop these technologies responsibly. We need to build trust. We need to educate policymakers. There's always a threat that if you get sucked into this technology discussion, there are some proposals out there that you're not excited about or that you think would hinder the deployment of this technology. But this is part of the process, and so I think that's why a lot of the technology companies have people like me in DC to help navigate sort of the regulatory minefield. And I'm glad we're having these discussions because otherwise I wouldn't have a job.
I was going to say, if it was easy, they wouldn't need you. Yeah. Well, great. I think that's all the time we have. I want to thank our panelists and everybody here today. We'll see if there's a bunch of smart glasses out here in 5 years. But thanks so much, guys.
And he's still awake, so I'm impressed. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you to our panelists. Our next session will begin in approximately 10 minutes.